Going. All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Talking Trout. We're excited to have you with us. I can't believe it's March already. I don't know where February went, but it feels like yesterday we were just doing this, and here we are a month later. So I think we've got a pretty timely topic tonight. We have a great guest, Tom Lager from the Fox Valley chapter of Trout Unlimited. Some of you may know him from the TU Cares program in the Central Sands area. Tom does a lot of volunteer work there. And he's also on our executive committee for the state council. I had the pleasure of working with Tom over the course of the last, I don't know, how long have we been serving together now? Probably 5, 6, 7 years, Tom. And it's been a lot of fun, but it's really great I'm excited for your presentation tonight. I've heard you talk about bugs before, and it's always entertaining, and it's eye-opening, and I learned a ton of stuff from it. So we're really looking forward to that. And instead of talking trout tonight, we're going to talk black caddis. So with that, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you. And maybe before you jump into this, if you could just take a minute and kind of give everybody an update on your bio and kind of tell us how you got to where you're at right now.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk about bugs. I love that. Before I'll start sharing the screen, so you've got something here to look at, and hopefully we won't have any technical challenges as we progress. I got into bugs. Just to be real brief, as a youngster, there was a stream running through our farm, and I always was attracted to whatever crawled in there, and there were a lot of critters in there, and I was always interested in the outdoors. I went to college, got a master's degree in aquatic ecology. I worked for the Minnesota DNR for a number of years. I worked for the Institute of Biochemistry and studied bugs from Montana to Maine, Florida to Mississippi. So I had a lot of experience doing that. And then a recession came along, and I deviated from my career and spent 30 years in Kimberly-Clark working on product design and research and development, and left that. And now during that time, I stayed in touch with Trout Unlimited. That kept me tied to the bugs and trout. So now I'm full-time Trout Unlimited volunteer, and we're going to talk about bugs tonight. So, Mike, does everything look okay from your perspective as far as the screen?
Hey, I was just going to tell you, Tom, it looks like we're seeing the presenter mode. So we're seeing all of your notes in that too.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to.
Okay, I'm going to stop the share for a moment, and I'm going to go out and try this one more time. I'll try this. Okay. Now do you see that in the full screen?
Yeah, that looks great.
Okay, I'm going to set that up. Is it still full screen?
Yep, we're still good.
Okay, that's the title. I'm going to talk about Grannom, or black caddis, as it's called in some parts of our world. This is the agenda that I'm going to follow. I'm going to talk about the origin of the common name, the importance of Grannom to fly fishing, how to find Grannom in streams of Wisconsin, and then to become a better fisher in association with Grannom or the black caddis. It's important to know a little bit about the life cycles and behaviors of the bugs, because that directly trends into fishing success. And of course, we'll show a few pictures of Grannom flies that may catch trout. But during this whole thing, I'd like you to be aware of two things. And kind of themes that run through this. First of all, it's the color green. You'll see that talked about throughout the whole presentation, and it's one of the key deliverables here. And then connectedness. Anybody who is an ecologist is aware that everything is connected. So you'll see a lot of the connections between everything here in the presentation, from bugs to trout to culture. So just pay attention to those. So let's jump right into this. Grannom is a name, and when I researched it, where did it come from? Well, it came from England. And there was a fellow there who wrote a book in 1836 entitled The Fly Fisher's Entomology. This guy was Alfred Reynolds, and what he talked about were the bugs of the UK. And Brachycentrus, which is the Latin name for the bug we're talking about tonight, they called it, or he called it first, Grannom. And it was due to its association with the green color or the green tail of the bug. So as we go through this presentation, the term Grannom originated in Europe, but came to North America along with the fly fishing culture. It was part of the language they used, and was descriptive of an important caddisfly in the UK, and also down into other parts of Europe. So in the US, Grannom is the most common term used to describe Brachycentrus. Now, there are exceptions to that. Wisconsin is certainly one of them. In Wisconsin, black caddis is used quite commonly as the term to describe Brachycentrus, and parts of the western US as well. In Montana and Wyoming, they also refer to it as the Mother's Day caddis. And you can understand why that is, because it comes off near Mother's Day in certain parts of Montana and Wyoming. And some people refer to this as Brachycentrus. So that, for example, if anybody's familiar with Ross Mueller's books on fly fishing in Wisconsin, he uses all three of the terms, black caddis, Grannom, and Brachycentrus. Now, one of the things I just wanted to talk about when we go through this presentation, a lot of the pictures and the video, that represents about 7 years of work. And in a few places, I have photographed a couple pages out of textbooks or made references. Like, for example, this picture of Reynolds here, that came out of a book in the UK. But at the end of the presentation, I give everybody credit for those pictures that I've taken off the internet. And I think there's about 4 or 5 instances where the content isn't original to myself, but hopefully you will enjoy 7 years of work. So let me continue then. So we've talked about the common name, and just the other comment about common names. Scientists have the privilege of putting a Latin name on things. So we as fishers should have the privilege of putting a common name on them of our own origin. And so it's perfectly okay to call them Grannom or black caddis or the Mother's Day caddis. We've got about 250 different kinds of caddis in Wisconsin. So there's plenty of opportunity there to develop and use your own names. But sometimes it can be confusing. So for example, in Wisconsin, if you're talking about black caddis, you could be talking about Brachycentrus, or you could be talking about 5 other black caddis in Wisconsin. And in this diagram, in the series of pictures, the top row is Brachycentrus. So we have pictures of the adult, the larva, the case structure, and the shuck. So looking across there, we notice that the color of the adult isn't really black. It's gray or tan or charcoal in some instances, whereas chimera, which is common in Wisconsin, it's jet black. And it's the same color, same size, not the same color, but the same size as Grannom. But there are some differences. So if we look at Brachycentrus or Grannom going across the top, we see that it's brown and tan in color, sometimes charcoal. The larvae are black and lime green or chartreuse in color. You compare that to Chimera. Chimera has a sort of a lime-colored abdomen, an amber head and thorax. The case structure for Brachycentrus or Grannom, it's a case made out of silk with impregnated sand grains and chips of bark. The Chimera makes a very fine silk stocking-like net that floats in the stream and gathers organic material that the insect eats. So it's considerably different in this case structure. And the shuck is a clear shuck that you find floating down the center of trout streams. The Chimera, the shuck never arrives in the stream because the Chimera will crawl out onto the bank, and then that's where it'll shed its shuck to turn into an adult. So there are some meaningful differences in what's a black caddis and what is Chimera and what is Brachycentrus in Wisconsin. And here are a couple other black caddis. We have the black dancer, the tiny black shorthorn sedge, the tiny black Grannom. Those are all other small, similar sized black caddis in Wisconsin. But you make your choice as to what term you want to use. The choice that I've made for this presentation, I will use the term Grannom or Brachycentrus. And again, you can use any term that you want to. And let's talk about the importance of Grannom to fly fishing. They are important because there are, it's the first real hatch that comes into the central sands area, and even pretty much statewide. It's the first hatch of the season, and in fact there are two hatches. There's one that occurs in April, one that occurs later in the summer, but they're both Grannom hatches. And Grannom are present in the trout streams all year around. And they're widely distributed within the state. So they're all over the place. This is a chart, a hatch chart. It's a pretty standard one that I use for the central region of Wisconsin. Down the side here are the common names of bugs. Across the top are the months of the year. The months are divided up into weeks. And the way that you read the chart is the X's designate those weeks during the month in which the adult form of the bug is aerial or is flying about in trout streams or near trout streams. And the dark highlighted squares associated with the X, those are the weeks and the months that the numbers of adults flying about is most dense. So they're most abundant during those time periods of the darkest color. So we see here for Grannom, there are two hatches, one in April into early May. Another one starts in late August and drifts into the latter part of September, where most of them emerge. So there are two times of the year that we can fish the hatch. And because I'm going to be talking a lot about the life cycle of caddisflies, I just want to review this with you. And I know that almost all of you understand what this is. But starting out, the larvae are in the bottom of the streams. They've built a case of some design. They live in that, they develop, and then they transition to the pupal stage, which is just like the butterfly. The pupa is the intermediate stage between the larval stage and the adult. The pupa then cuts its way out of the cocoon inside the larval case and then swims to the surface. Scientists like to use the word ferrate adult for this particular stage, and because there may be a scientist or one or two listening, we'll use at least one scientific word tonight. It's a ferrate adult that swims up. And the ferrate adult swims up and puts in and it rests against the bottom of the surface layer of the water, and there's high surface tension. It's difficult to transition through the surface of a stream, both coming from the outside down and the downside going up. But the exoskeleton of the ferret adult splits open and out pops the adult. The adult flies away and rests in trees and other vegetation alongside the trout stream. And it takes several days before it becomes a mature adult. The next stage is mating. And they don't do the mating above the stream. They mate off to the side of the stream on rocks and logs. And I'll show you some video of that later on. So they mated. After the mating occurs, the female returns to the stream. She will lay eggs on the surface, or she will lay eggs on the bottom of the stream. She gets to the bottom of the stream most commonly by crawling down, finding a rock or a branch that is extending up through the water column. She will crawl down the side of the rock beneath the water and then swim to lay her eggs on solid substrates in the bottom of the stream. So when we're talking about the hatch period, we're talking about these life stages up here. The ferret adult that swims up, mature mating caddisflies that then return and complete the life cycle. So inside this area, that's what we refer to as the hatch. Now, more specifically, we're talking about when caddisflies are available to trout in the stream. And the answer is they're always available to trout in the stream. And let's just take, for example, the Grannom from the April hatch. That's Brachycentrus occidentalis. And you see this list of months going across. The L stands for larva. So during February, the April hatch is in the larval stage. Pupal stage starts in March and into April, and then the adult emerges in the latter part of April and into May. And you can see the adults with the A's here stay on the wing, most commonly at the beginning of the period, but they extend as late as July. But also in July, the next generation of larvae start to appear, and then they grow and develop throughout the rest of the year. So if you're interested in fishing the aerial Grannom hatches, you can do that from April all the way to September, because in August, then another species of Brachycentrus in Wisconsin hatches out. And this is Brachycentrus americanus. And you can see that August is when the adults start to arrive. They're most commonly found in later September. Then the larvae are present during the rest of the year, and pupation starts in July. So the connection here from the life cycle to trout is it's an ongoing thing all year long. It just varies in its life stage and whether or not, and from a fisher's perspective, you can spend most of your summer fishing the adult Grannom. So now let's talk about the distribution in Wisconsin. Geographically, they're pretty widespread in the state. We just talked about the fact from a timing perspective, they're always there. So okay, first of all, I just want to remind us that we have a total of 5 different kinds of Brachycentrus in Wisconsin. We're only going to talk about 2 of them because they're the most common. And the first map, these maps were created by Hilsenhoff, who was a professor of entomology at Madison a number of years ago. And in 1985, he published a paper that contained this information. So I borrowed it from him. And for the April hatch, the species here is Brachycentrus occidentalis. You see the map shows counties. The black circles represents which counties have a population of the April hatch caddis. And the size of the dot indicates The largest size indicates the largest population. So it gives you an idea of how widely spread they are in the state, where they're found in the state, and what areas they're most numerous. September, it's the same thing, but it's a different species. It's Americanus is the species, and its distribution in Wisconsin is a bit further north than the April hatch, but you can see where it's most common. Now, the thing that really gets me excited here about bugs and trout, and this is a big connection. You look at this DNR map over here. This is a map of trout streams. You've all seen this before. Now look at the overlap. Look at the distribution, in particular, of the April hatch, or where the adults are found. And larvae are found there too, obviously. But look at the overlay. And to a lesser extent, but still significant, September, it's the same thing. So when you think about the brook trout of Wisconsin, our native char of Wisconsin, they evolved over thousands and thousands and thousands of years in the company of evolving caddis, Brachycentrus caddis. So they co-evolved together over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So they know each other. There's something about the environment of a trout stream that's essential to the ecological success of Brachycentrus. Now that's a pretty astounding, my way of thinking, astounding connection. But now you think, well, yes, we have brook trout in Wisconsin, but we also have brown trout, right? Well, how do brown trout fit into this? Well, remember back to the book that was written in 1836. This fellow in England was describing Grannom. And he called it Grannom because it had a green tail, right? So brown trout are native to Europe and the UK. So in that environment, they also had Brachycentrus. So brown trout evolved in a coexistence with Brachycentrus in European and UK trout streams. So after European settlement got underway in North America, Europeans brought brown trout over here and plunked them down in the state to the east of us. And those brown trout were I'm sure they must have felt just awesomely impressed that they found Brachycentrus over here as well. So brown trout are in these streams in Wisconsin, and they're feeding on a different species of Brachycentrus that they co-evolved with over in Europe, but it's pretty much the same. So this is a great example of the connections that trout have with Grannom. Now, here's another connection. When we work to understand, or we develop a knowledge base of Grannom in Wisconsin, that information is transferable because the species of Grannom that we have in Wisconsin are also found in other places of the US. For example, the April hatch Brachycentrus is also found in western rivers from New Mexico all the way to British Columbia. So all the way up the spine of the Rocky Mountains, Brachycentrus occidentalis is there. So what you learn about it in Wisconsin, you can apply it when you go out west to fish. It's a little bit different and more expansive for the September hatch Brachycentrus in Wisconsin. They're also in the western rivers, but also they're found in the northern eastern rivers from Connecticut to New Brunswick. So again, this is a great connection. And there's other few connections. You can see here in this caricature of somebody grinning at us. It looks like somebody didn't know how to put, or didn't know when to stop putting sunscreen on. But anyway, notice this is in Montana. So notice the black caddis under the hat rim, and look how darkly colored they are. And perhaps that contributed to the use of a black caddis name out west. But I think this also indicates that caddis don't care too much about what they land on. So when we are out looking to find out where caddis are, there's a few hints. about them. They're typically found in small, medium, and large rivers and streams, which means any place you've got flowing water in Wisconsin, you're probably going to find them if the quality of the water meets trout standards. For example, you want to have high volume of flow and swift flows. And here are some typical streams. Big Spring Branch in Vernon County. We have the Rush and the Bighorn. Those are typical environments. Now, when we start looking at the bugs, these are some examples of what the larval cases look like. The main construction material in a larval case is silk. They have silk glands in their mouth, and they spin silk just like spiders do. And that's what holds their case structures together. Many times they use small bits of bark, and they form if you cut this in half, it's a squared cut through here as opposed to being circular. It has sharp edges along the side. That's pretty typical, but not all of the cases are built that way. And when you think about when you go to Home Depot and you pick out materials to do repairs on your house, you pick out what they've got available. Well, the bugs are the same way. They look at what's available to them in the stream. If there aren't a lot of wood chips around, a lot of sand, well, that's what they'll select. For example, these Grannom here, they've mostly selected sand as their building material. And when you're walking in a stream, like up here, make notes. Every time I go fishing, every time I spend time on a stream, I make notes about what I am seeing. I've got about 14 different notebooks completed, and they're a tremendous source of information for me to go back to. And you don't have to put a lot of information in there, but if you keep track of where you see things like this. I was walking on the Chocolate River up in the UP, when I was fishing up there with Jim Jenkin, and I noticed all these little brown specks on the bottom. Well, what they are, they're Brachycentrus cases, and they're attached to little pebbles in the sand. They need to attach themselves to a stable substrate. This area of sand here that can shift in the current, you don't find them there because they need to attach themselves to a stable substrate. And here's a larger rock. And notice the Grannom have attached themselves to that rock. It's going to stay in place. It'll be stable. The stream, unless it's really in flood stage, it'll wash it away under those conditions. But because they're filter feeders, they attach the case to a stable substrate, and they use their legs to filter the water. And this was in the Flume Creek in June a couple of years ago. And in other streams, like the Rush, there's a rock that I picked up and turned it over. There's a lot of sand, and lo and behold, there's a whole mess of Brachycentrus. But because sand is the most common substrate, that's what they use for construction material. In the Pine River in central Wisconsin, the bottom of our streams here are sand and shifting sand. So it's an unstable environment. So the most common location that you will find Brachycentrus will be on rocks and on logs and sticks and branches that are submerged in the stream. And they'll build their cases out of sand and also wood chips. So now let's get into some of the real interesting information about Grannom that can be directly translated into fishing success. It's behaviors. And this has to do with what Grannom do in a stream. So we'll talk about their life stages and then their behaviors, their feeding, their movement, their emerging, egg laying. And I'll do this from the viewpoint of the life cycle. And I'll start with the larval stage and go through the pupa, adult, and finally the egg stage. Now, it doesn't mean that's how you will encounter these bugs in a stream. They can be emerging in one area of the stream, and 50 yards downstream, they're not emerging, but they're mating. Or 30 yards downstream, nothing is going on. But if you wait a half an hour, the area where there's nothing going on, maybe emergence will start there. So in other words, when we're talking about egg laying or emergence, that can be going on at any time, at any place in these streams. Just to point out a couple of things in these pictures, this is a Montana Brachycentrus. Look how dark and charcoal it is. Here's a Wisconsin one. They're both the same species, they're just colored differently. And again, look at the beautiful green color up there with the larva. That's a Grannom color. And here you can see the sharp edge on the corners that where the different sections of bark chips fit up against themselves. And it's all held together with silk. Now, again, I'm just going to quickly go over the life cycle because that's where we're going to focus. I'll start down here on the larval stage, go up to the ferret adult, the mature adults, mating, then egg laying. So that's the sequence I'm going through. So larval Grannom, as I've hinted before, they're primarily filter feeders. Oh, speaking of hints, in each one of these slides, I'm going to include a Fisher hint on them, and it's lettered in gold to kind of get your attention because some of my hints might be somewhat valuable, who knows. But anyway, if you're going to go out looking for Grannom, you have to look in fast flowing water. That's where you're going to find it because they're filter feeders. And in this picture here, the water flows from the left to the right. This is a rock that the Grannom have attached their cases to, and notice their legs are all up into the water column because they use the leg structure as a sieve. They comb out. In this picture that I took from Flint, 1984, one of his diagrams, so it's easier to show what goes on. And these structures on the inside of the leg, they capture organic particles and diatoms and little crustaceans that float down the river. That's what they feed on. And also look at the arrangement. You know, they're you know, this guy is getting the water flow that comes between the other two. And this next guy is centered off to the side. They space themselves so that they all have access to a fresh flow of organic material flowing downstream. So again, they're filter feeders. Now this is a video that I shot at the Great Waters Expo in Minneapolis a number of years ago. Dean Hansen has done just a fabulous job in setting up aquaria during that event. And he permitted me to share with you a video that I shot through the glass of one of his aquaria. And you'll notice how tenaciously these Grannom attach themselves and hold up in the fast current that just vibrating them. So let's take a look. And look how rigorous the current is moving the larva around, but they're held in place by the cemented silk thread that holds the case to the rock, and that way they can have all 6 of their legs out there straining the water. The other behavior of all insects, and some of this is accidental, but there's a current that flows downstream, and aquatic insects, all of them in the stream, use the current sometimes to redistribute themselves so that
Hey, Tom, I lost your audio. I don't know if it's just me or if other people are noticing that too.
No, we lost it. Same here.
All right. Well, I'm going to give Tom like maybe a minute to check his settings.
Yeah, no sound for me either.
Do you have a telephone number you can call him in case he's not aware of it?
Hey, Tom, are you working on this? Yeah, we still can't, still not hearing you. Not sure what happened, but. Yeah, still nothing.
Did he take his share screen down?
All right, I'm gonna maybe give Tom a minute to try to figure that out. While he does, I will take a minute and say we've got, as far as Talking Trout goes, we've got a guest set up for April. We've got a guest set up for May. I think the plan is to take June and July and August off. And we're hoping that all of you would give us some feedback and maybe tell us like what you're looking to see as far as presentations in the future, what things you find valuable, what catches your interest, you know, what topics we should cover. And then the other thing I wanted to put a plug out there for is, and I'm more than happy to continue doing this, but I wanted to put the opportunity out there in case someone is interested in coming on and being a co-host and helping me out with putting these together every month. You know, if you're interested in doing that, feel free to reach out to me and we can talk a little bit more about it. It's actually surprisingly pretty easy to put it all together and get things running. So, but yeah, I think I'd throw it out there if someone is ambitious and would like to help out with this project. We could be more than willing to have somebody come on board. I'm going to, let me see here. All right, Tom. I'm going to give Tom co-host authority again. He's connected, but he's not, doesn't have a microphone yet. So not sure if he's got it figured out yet. I think he may be stepping off and then coming back. I do appreciate, I saw there was a question in the chat, someone asking about how long these cases are. If you haven't seen them in the trout stream, I know somebody mentioned this, that, you know, they're generally about a ½ an inch or less in size. And it's definitely something that once you notice them, like you start seeing them all over the place. So it's kind of cool when you stumble across a rock and you see all these little black cases all over that are sometimes a little frustrating when you see them and they're all empty and you realize that, oh, I should have been here a couple of days ago. I missed the hatch, you know. But like Tom said, there's always hope, right? You can always go check that next stretch downstream and see if that's working. So Tom, do we have you back yet? He's on mute. I think he's still having some audio issues. All right, I guess I will take another minute while I have the audience. I will let you folks know, I don't know if you saw it in the email today or not, but the Driftless Symposium, which is something that the Trout Unlimited Driftless Area Restoration Effort folks, TU Dare folks put on, that's gonna happen next week. It's gonna be Tuesday and Wednesday. It's usually an in-person event. This year, it's going to be pretty cool because it's virtual, which means you can all participate, you know, from the from the comforts of your own home. So, excuse me. I would encourage you to check that out. It's kind of geared towards folks who do actual stream restoration. So, like project managers, it's generally geared towards those types of folks, but there's so much good information inside of all those meetings, and I would encourage you to check out the list of presenters and try to get to a couple of those and attend that. So it should be pretty interesting. See, Tom keeps popping on and popping off, so I think he's trying to reconnect. Let's see. Just one more try. All right, Tom, I see you. Well, I don't see you, I guess, but I see you on here. Looks like you're muted. Do we have any audio?
Yes, I think we are.
All right, and we are back. Apologies for the technical interruption.
Okay,
there.
Sorry about the delay. Okay, aquatic insects have a propensity to drift downstream because the current is going in that direction. And they do it behaviorally to search for new feeding sites and to escape predation. Caddisflies, certain ones of them, and Brachycentrus in particular, has a habit of repelling downstream. In this picture here, you see the spot that the thread attaches the case to the stable substrate. They secrete a thread of silk, attach it to a stable substrate, and then they repel downstream. And this behavior was first discussed by Gary Borger and Gary LaFontaine. And in Gary LaFontaine's book called Caddisflies, it's a fantastic book if you are interested in learning about caddisflies. That's the book to get. It's out of print, but you can still find it in used bookstores. So you see on this branch I pulled up out of the west branch of the white, these are the why am I locked up? You see the cases that are suspended by the silk thread. Notice that the back end of the case is facing downstream. So the hint here is if you're going to fish the larval stage, you need to fish it with the back end of the case downstream. And this is to give you an example of what it looks like. This is a lepidostoma case that's sitting right here. It's related to Brachycentrus, but this case is also held on a strand of silk. The silk goes up in this direction off screen, and the case will swing back and forth here. So keep that in mind if you're going to fish the larval stage. And the larvae stay in the case. You won't be fishing a naked larva. You'll be fishing them in the case, and you see it swinging back and forth here. So keep that in mind if you're going to be fishing the Grannom larva in the case. And here again is the picture of the larva in the case. This is a design that I created a while ago. It's built with a black tungsten bead for the head, a starling feathers for the legs. Notice the Grannom green, and then the case material. And you can fish this again. The hint is is fish it off an anchor fly so that the anchor fly holds it down near the bottom, and then this fly will drift back and forth, and it might even catch trout. But that would be one way to fish the larva. Now we're going to move along in the life cycle and talk about the Grannom emergence. Remember, emergence occurs, or the hatch occurs twice a year, April and September. We're going to only talk about April. And the data that I'm presenting doesn't totally encompass all of the information that describes when and how Grannom emerge, but these are the conditions under which I saw them at the time. So in April, the emergence came off from noon to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The water temperature was 45 to 55, air temperature 40 to 65. And the key thing here, emerging Grannom are very difficult to see. So how do you find them? Well, you do that by watching what the trout are doing. The trout are rising in a concentrated rhythm in a confined area. That tells you something is going on. And typically you see a lot of shallow, flashy rises. Sometimes you see trout taking the caddis beneath the surface. And Grannom will be emerging primarily in the center part of the stream, in the thalweg of the stream, because the current kind of gathers them in that location as the pupa swims up to the surface and breaks through the surface tension, and the adult emerge. This is by far the best opportunity to fish this hatch, is when they're vulnerable and swimming up this, through the water column to emerge. And just as a reminder what they look like, on the left here, this is what the pupa look like. It's inside the shuck. Again, you can call this the ferried adult. This is what the shuck looks like. Notice these structures that the shuck has. The legs of the pupa are inside them, but these structures act as paddles or oars so that the pupa can efficiently, quickly swim to the surface. This is the emerged female. Notice her wings haven't been even extended yet, but the size, her size is large compared to the male because she's doing the work, right? She's carrying the eggs. Notice the Grannom green color. Grannom green color over here too. That's the green connection. Even the males have a bit of it. So let's look at video. I'm going to show you 2 videos. The first one is 10 trout rising in about 57 seconds. And the other one is 8 trout rising in 40 seconds. The video were shot on 2 separate days and in 2 separate reaches of the same stream. This is the thalweg. Most of the big trout will rise here. Small ones will rise along the end. Right in here, you're going to see the small little light colored dots of the Grannom going downstream. There's a larger one emerging there, and it's really hard to see the Grannom coming downstream. In fact, when I was there shooting the video, I only saw him in the video. I didn't see him in the stream. Now I'll slow this down and look at the tip of the arrow. Tip of the arrow is pointing at a Grannom floating down the stream, and later on you'll see another one at the tip of this arrow. So let's see what it looks like. So there comes the Grannom right coming along there, and the trout captured it. In a couple of seconds, you'll see another one come along, and our trout will capture it right off the tip of that arrow. And this can be frustrating, to understand what's rising. At this time of year, it could be blooming olives as well. But in this case, it happens to be Brachycentrus that are coming off. The Grannom is hatching. It should be there just right now is when, there it is. So let's look at it at a second section of the stream and notice how fast the rises come along, and notice the short distance that the Grannom is on the surface. So when you're casting your fly, trout are going to take it almost immediately because they're used to responding quickly to a rising trout. And I'll slow this down in a minute to help with the visibility, but you get the idea of how quickly and concentrated the hatch is. So when you see that activity, you know something is going on. So let's slow it down. And inside this rectangle is where I want you to watch. There's a Grannom right on the tip of that black arrow. And what it's going to do is going to drift downstream, and that's going to hop up, drift down, hop up, drift down, hop up. So what it's trying to do is to get off the stream surface, and it's struggling to do that, and the trout will take advantage of it. So that's why this is such a vulnerable time. Can you see it moving there? It's going along, it's hopping up, and the trout comes up from the bottom and captures it. So how do you know what was happening there? You know, what attracted your attention was the trout rising. And it's the time of year that you should think Grannom are coming off. But I check it to see what's going on, and I use a screen. And I strain the thaw wag downstream from where they're rising. And this is exactly what I found downstream from that last video. I brought these little gray clumps home under the microscope. That's what they were. Those are the shucks that were being shed by the emerging Grannom. Now here's some flies that you may want to use during the emergence period. These two can be used subsurface. So this gives you an idea what the pupil looks like. That's somewhat similar. And here's the adult that is just breaking through the surface and starting to drift downstream and trying to get off the surface. So you can fish this just below the surface. And then those that have broken through, this is just like a modified elk wing. You've got the elk wing hairs here, the green colored, the chartreuse green of the Grannom, and then this represents the color of the trailing shuck. So that gives you an idea of how you can fish the emergence, and that's the best time to fish. This is the worst time to fish it in front of us. This is the mating season. Before I kind of gave you a hint, when the caddis adults are mature, they fly off to the vegetation and the trees along the stream to finish their maturity. Then they come together, not above the stream, they come together on the vegetation alongside the stream. So you see them crawling all around there. The males are mobbing the females. It's usually between 1 and 5 in the afternoon. And because they are off away from the stream, you might as well not even be fishing there, because this is what you're going to see. These are primarily adult males crawling along on a log right next to the Pine River. And you'll see in a minute a female that is mobbed. Here she is, she's caught by the male, and they're mating. The tips of the abdomen are brought together for the mating process. Their heads are pointing in opposite directions. It's no wonder that they can't fly. You can't fly with the heads pointing in the opposite direction. Like mayflies can mate above the stream and fall down onto the stream. Caddisflies do not. They mate along the side, and here you see another mating pair moving along. Occasionally, some will fall into the edge of the stream, and you might be able to capture some trout that are exploring this area. But notice how they maintain their position on top of the surface tension of the water. And look how low to the water surface the fly is. So bear that in mind when you're designing your flies. Now, next we're going to get into the egg laying portion of their life cycle. And again, this is a pretty good fishing opportunity. And these are the conditions, again, that I observed what was going on in the videos that I'll show you in a moment. Most of the time, the egg laying occurred between noon and 4 o'clock. Now, that's the same time emergence has been going on as well. So again, all of this goes on at the same time, but in different locations along the stream. I've never seen emergence happening in the same section as egg laying, but it could, I guess. So that water temperature is 48 to 55, 44 to 65 is for the air temperature. And the flights are right above the stream. Typically they're flying in an upstream direction right over the stream. And these are mainly females because they do the egg laying. And they like warm summer afternoons with light wind. If the wind is high, that blows the females off the stream and they'll have to figure out a different time to do their egg laying. The video that I'll share with you is about 60 seconds in length. And you'll see about 60 Grannom flying along in an upstream direction, and only about 3 or 4 of them are laying eggs. So let's take a look at what's going on here. This is slow motion, by the way. And you'll see these little fluttering dots that are moving along. Those are the females. And this is right in the middle of the day. So you're not going to see any trout rising to this because I'm crouched right on the edge of the stream. There are brook trout right in front of me, but they're not rising. But I have seen in the past brook trout leap all the way out of the water and catch these aerial forms flying. 8 to 10 inch brookies leap all the way out and capture these caddis on the wing. And you'll see a few caddis landing on the surface and then drifting down for a second or two. That's the only length of time they're on the surface. So they're flitting around. So when you're casting your fly, you try to mimic the rapid movement, try to animate your fly so that it mimics the adult laying eggs on the surface. So let's slow this down a little bit and magnify it. So here you get a chance to see the females fluttering and landing. Notice they don't stay on the water very long. So you've got to be quick with your casting. Short, fast casts probably would serve you well, but you're going to be close to the bank here. Snag up a few times and say a few words. Let's slow this down just a little bit further. And now you're going to be able to see like this adult female here. Look how she lands on the water. Low profile. So you don't want a real high floating fly floating right in the surface tension would be a good place. Right in the surface film would be a good place to be. Look how beautiful that is, though, isn't it? Again, this is a wonderful time to be fishing. And here we have another form of egg laying, and that's underwater. I do not have any video of underwater egg laying, but we know it happens. And the female, again, her most common approach is not to dive through the surface because that's really difficult for a small body to come through all that surface tension. She's going to land on a rock or on a branch that's sticking out, and she'll crawl down into the water column through the surface film, and then she'll lay eggs on branches and rocks subsurface. And you'll notice all the eggs are Grannom green. This is a great fishing opportunity because they're down, they're swimming underwater where the trout are. And here are some pictures of submerged eggs. This is a branch that I pulled up out of Davies Creek in May of 2020. And here's an egg mass that's been laid on the branch. So for a size reference, this is my fingertip up here. Here is a Grannom larval case here. This is the enlarged picture of the mass that was laid down. And you can just imagine what the female is doing. She's running, she's rubbing her abdomen back and forth as she moves in this direction, and she's extruding eggs. A single layer of eggs is being laid down. And notice the color. It's all Grannom green. And you talk about a connection between, a color and an insect, and it's pretty evident here. Here are some effective egg or fly patterns. All of these work well, and trade them up as you want to. The first one is real easy. It's a gray CDC wing over a chartreuse wrapped shank, size 17, 14 and 16. Anything in that range will work well. Try that skip hopping fashion. Animate your fly on the surface. You could also pull that one under surface and fish it wet if you wanted to. The next one I like a lot. I tied this based on directions from Brian McPhail in the UK. And notice he's included in his design some Grannom green on the tip of the abdomen, and certainly soft hackles work very well. A nice Grannom green wrap on the hook shank. Here we have some starling herald, a starling back feather wings up there. It's a great use of a starling. But fish them wet. And these you can tie a soft hackle like this beneath an anchor fly and fish it down along the bottom. You could even have it dropped from McPhail's fly here. And you could pull this one wet as also, and it could be fished underwater, mimicking a drowned adult. All these the females, they're all going to end up drowned at the end, because they're either going to be exhausted and lay on the surface of the stream and drift down and become part of the flotsam. But certainly those that dive underwater, that's where they're going to die. And they'll be drifting downstream. So there's a lot of trout feeding activity subsurface. And the last big connection, this is the reward at the end of the presentation here. And I think there's a number of people on this presentation that may identify with this trout. This is a trout that was caught during a Grannom emergence. And it was caught on the top fly of the last slide that I showed you, that real simple fly. And it was released. And if you don't believe in the value of released trout, this will help convince you. This is a tiger trout. I know of 3 other guys who have caught the same trout over a period of a couple of years. Here I struggle a little bit. The net got caught in the lower teeth, but it was safely returned. And we based it on photographs, still photographs that were taken over a period of a couple of years. That same tiger trout was captured by at least three fishers. And this is the documentation that I borrowed from other people. And again, most of the content that I've shown tonight is what I've gathered. I'm glad to be sharing it because it does me no good to sit in a computer someplace and not be shared. So if anybody out there has interest in the presentation, it's being recorded. It's been recorded at other times as well. So that's the end of my presentation, and sorry about the technical problems that we experienced along the way. So I'll open it up now to any questions, and I'm going to stop sharing in the event that something else may happen that will derail me. So with that, Mike, I'm done.
Oh no, you're not. We got a few more questions for you. If you'll stay with us.
I will attempt to stay with.
All right, that'd be great. As long as we got audio, let's roll with it. So yeah, I'll let you catch your breath. That was a great presentation, Tom. You know, aside from the technical issues, like that stuff happens, and regardless, the presentation was awesome. I think it opened my eyes to a lot of things. I think when I hear black caddis, I'm like, oh, it's got to be a black body. But like seeing all the pictures, I'm like, put little green hot spots here and there occasionally in a fly, but boy, I'm not putting nearly enough green into my flies as I should be. So I appreciate you for showing that and sharing that with us, and just in time for me to make some corrections before April, right?
Right, that's right. It's just around the bend, you know, in 4 weeks we should, well, maybe 6, but it'll be there.
Yep, we'll be there soon enough. So a couple of people had a question about that hatch chart that you shared. And I was just curious, is that something that you created yourself? Is that something you pulled off the internet somewhere, or?
It's based on my field notes, but I've also, and it didn't show very well in the picture, but I give credit to a number of people. Ross Mueller has a very effective hatch charts in his books. And I think there is it's escaping me at the moment. There is a website, Wisconsin Fly Fishing may have a website that there is some information on, and just grabbed another source here. This is Wisconsin, it's Fly Fish Wisconsin. They have a hatch chart on there. So what I've done, I've taken information from a variety of sources, put them together into that format, and then I've given credit to those sources that I used. But here's the cautionary tale about hatch charts. It depends on where in the state you're at. You know, there's if you look at the bottom half of or the border with Illinois compared to Ashland in the north, there's about a 21-day difference in the phenology of events that occurs. So for example, the Grannom hatch could start in the driftless area, but it won't hit the Ashland area until almost 3 weeks after it's been underway down in the driftless area. And then we've got climate change coming on. Climate change is going to screw up our hatch charts. So, but yes, that hatch chart is available if anybody wants it. It's on our Fox Valley TU website somewhere. And we're working on improving that website so people can access it.
Yeah, I saw somebody mention in the chat that it may not be working. The link on the Fox Valley site may not be working correctly, but regardless.
We're in the process of redoing that.
Okay, so regardless, I know somebody just mentioned this book, and I'll put it out there if anybody has Ann Miller's book.
I can't wait to get a copy.
The Hatch Guide for Upper Midwest Streams. It's I think there are more copies on the way. Like somebody mentioned, it might have even been released today was the release date. But it's a great little book to have along, and tons of information in there, and really great photographs as well. So somebody was curious about whether or not, when you were comparing the two different species, the one that hatches in April versus the one that hatches in like August, September, do they prefer the same types of habitat in the streams, so like that rockier, fast, riffly water, or do they gravitate to a different type of stream?
You know, if you remember back to the maps that I showed for Wisconsin, the April hatch was more widely distributed among trout streams in Wisconsin, and the September hatch was more northern in distribution. And Hilsenhoff talks about that in his paper he published in 1985. There seems to be a preference with the September hatch to be more of a northern distributed species. So they occupy the similar physical environment, but it seems like the temperature environment, they prefer something that's colder and what they would find in the northern part of the state.
Sure, that makes sense. Somebody had a question about how dominant this species of caddis is in regards to like if you look at a stream and like all the different species of flies that are, you know, macroinvertebrates that are in that stream, like has anyone ever tried to put like a percent? Oh, I suppose it's different for every stream, you know, everyone's it's unique site-specific situation, but somebody was wondering how prevalent are these flies compared to everything else that's in the stream? Is this like?
Well, I would say that Grannom Brachycentrus are probably, along with some of the nets, you know, the hydrocychids, you know, let me use a common term, the spotted sedge. You know, when you pull up a rock, you see the green larvae crawling out of little retreats made out of silk and moss. It's probably the Brachycentrus and those net spinning caddis flies that are probably the most common. Numerically, they're probably equal to the blue-wing olive larvae, mayflies, but they are, you know, it's hard to really make that comparison. I guess what I would say is, if you're going to fish caddis flies in Wisconsin, Grannom are going to be as important to you as the tan colored sedges are. They're not going to be, I mean, yeah, I think that's a true statement. They're not going to be, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I know it's a tough one you can't just put an actual number on. You can't say, well, they're 12% of the macroinvertebrate population in these streams, because everything is different. But
you'll know in the driftless area, I mean, they're all over the driftless area. If you're in the driftless area and you got a high quality stream flowing, you're going to have Grannom there. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the trout certainly know they're there, and the trout certainly know when they're hatching and when they're moving, and when they're susceptible to becoming a meal. So here's I'm going to call out my buddy Eddie, because he was telling me a story today about the caddis that are making cases, and he heard something that somebody was having these caddis create these little pieces of jewelry by
yeah. No, that's absolutely true. It's absolutely true.
It is.
You know, I've never seen it done. It would be difficult to do on Grannom, but some of the like the October caddis, or some of those caddis flies that are found in slow moving water, and they build their cases out of sticks or gravel. And it's those that you put in an aquarium, and instead of having sand grains around them, you put chips of jewelry around them, and they will take those chips of glass or whatever, and they'll build their case with them, because they've got no choice. You know, they've gone to their Menards, and that's all they can buy. So that's what they're going to use. So if you want to have colored pieces of straw or debris and some gold, you know, gold pellets, you know, or maybe out in California, maybe they discovered that some of those caddis were using real gold in those cases.
The gold rush, the next gold rush. Yeah, that's interesting. And I so thought Eddie was pulling my leg today, because he's kind of
he's
a joker.
Absolutely correct. But you know, you can only, I don't know, Eddie, but maybe there's some borders to what you can believe or not believe. But this time, Eddie is correct.
All right. He's going to love hearing that. So somebody had a more serious question about, and I apologize if you covered this already. I didn't catch it, but is there a certain time frame between when the caddis hatch and when they come back and lay their eggs? Is that generally like a 24-hour period, 48 hours? Like, do we know about how long that period is from the time they hatch to the time they're coming back to drop the eggs?
Yeah, it's probably a day or so, you know, 24 to 48 hours, but then it's going to vary on the conditions, the temperature conditions during that time period. And it'll be, you know, let's say that the Grannom take 3 days to be sexually mature. It depends what's the weather condition like on day 3. They may just stay hunkered down in the grass or in the trees along the stream because it's too cold. You know, notice that their activities never started before noon. And the only reason that you want to get on a stream to fish the Grannom hatch early is because you want to beat your buddies to the stream. you're not going to start seriously fishing until around 11 or noon. But you want to get there around 6 and 7 and have coffee to hold your spot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So, well, I know it's getting late here. That you covered a ton, Tom, and we really appreciate you taking your time, and I appreciate everybody sticking around and sticking through the technical issues. And just thanks again for sharing your knowledge with us. We really appreciate that. And like I said, I know for me personally, it really opened my eyes a lot more to think about what I'm actually trying to imitate, and I probably need to do a better job when I'm tying my flies at imitating those insects. So thanks for pointing that out.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This has been a wonderful time. Anybody wants any other information, they know how to get a hold of me.
Yeah,
Okay,
I will
good
say.
night.
Yeah, I will say Tom Lager is, for those of you who are Trout Unlimited members, you get the Wisconsin Trout newspaper. Tom's contact info is in there. He's on our executive committee. He's the Central Region vice chair. So you can find him on one of the first couple of pages. We'll have Tom's contact information if you want to reach out to him and ask him with any more specific questions. So, but thanks again, everybody, for joining us tonight. Thanks again, Tom, for sharing your knowledge and doing the presentation. That was great. So we'll catch everybody in a month.
Okay,
Take
thank
care.
you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.